work with my team a lot on that, like how to pitch ideas and how to, bring something to the table. It's often less about data and more about what are you convicted about?
Can you articulate the role you would want? And if you can't, Whisper's probably not right for you, because we're here to help you go do your search for you versus you sit back and wait.
Actually, in the interview, I want to hear stories about people, because that to me indicates an openness and a self-awareness about why they are the way that they are now.
As you think through like hiring a senior level role, how do you approach that?
The best success I've had with senior hires is actually when you're hiring someone to that next level. By saying what you want, you're indicating that you weren't getting those things at your previous company, but you're doing it without pointing the finger at them.
Welcome to How I Hire, the podcast where we talk with senior go-to-market leaders about how they find, vet, attract, and grow new talent. My name is Andy Mowat, founder of Whispered. At Whispered, we believe your next role won't be posted, it'll be whispered. Today, I'm joined by Sylvia LePoidevin. Sylvia, great to see you.
Great to see you too. That was an excellent pronunciation.
Oui. Je parle français. J'ai étudié le français pour 14 ans.
Your French is infinitely better than mine.
Well, with your name, I assumed you were more fluent than I am. But Sylvia is the CMO at Kandji. And before that, she was early marketing hire at Flowcast and DataFox. If people haven't come across DataFox, it was like the OG signals companies. All these RevOps people, we always talk about it. And I think you and the leadership there did an amazing job. We were so sad when it got sold to Oracle. But it's terrific to have you. You've spoken a lot about how powerful storytelling is for marketers. How does that guide the team that you build? And how do you think about that?
Yeah, such a good question. I mean, I think it comes back to actually in the interview, I want to hear stories about people. Like I want to hear their life story. I want to hear the story about what they want to build in the future. I want to hear the story of hard things that they've overcome in their life that's made them the person that they are today. And I think part of the reason I feel so passionately about that is because when I was 22, I interviewed at this company called Flowcast. I was their 12th employee. And when I interviewed there, they told me, this is probably not legal, but they were like, you're the youngest and least qualified candidate that we're interviewing. And they hired me anyway. And why did they hire me anyway, right? Like, it's really because I have this crazy backstory. I grew up in Africa my whole life. My parents do nonprofit work there. I moved to the US by myself when I was 17. I had nothing. I worked every terrible job you could imagine, but I just cared and I really wanted to make it. And that's, I think, really why they hired me, because they were like, well, if you can do that, you can probably figure out marketing at this company, right? Like I really brought my whole self and told my story. And I think that story is what got me the job, even though I probably would have been on paper at the bottom of the list. That story put me at the top of the list. And so I'm super passionate about storytelling. Specifically that telling your personal story in the interview. But I'm also passionate about it, in terms of how it affects how I work with my team right now. I really think internal marketing is just as important as external marketing. Obviously, as a marketer, you have to be great at storytelling externally, right? But to get your ideas to have budget and support and backing, you need to be great at that internal storytelling. And I talk to a lot of marketers that are like, I want to try that thing, but how did you measure the success of it? And they're always trying to find the data. And that's cool. The data is great to have, but the data without a bigger story, I've seen good ideas come to life because somebody was convicted about it and they told a good story about the impact that it was going to have versus the ones that are pitched in here's a bunch of numbers. I need a story to latch onto to be able to back your idea. And so I work with my team a lot on that, how to pitch ideas and how to, bring something to the table. And it's often less about data and more about what are you convicted about and how are you going to tell a story about the impact that it's going to have. And I find that's more powerful than trying to pull every data point to prove that that's true.
I love that. There's one VC that told me, I guess when you're fundraising, there's the parallel of what's the story they tell about you when you're not in the room,
yes.
Right? And so I think a lot of people think it's how long and how can I talk? But in the end, it's about that one, which marketers are so great at is what's the one thing I'm going to leave you with that's just going to be on the tip of your tongue, right? And I think if you do great marketing, you can boil it down to that one phrase, right? Like we actually, ChatGPT helped us write ours, which was your next role won't be posted, it'll be whispered. And everyone's like, I get it, right? Like it goes to the heart and the soul. It's funny because there's so many marketing taglines where I literally challenge so many people on this, and I bet you do too. It's like, great, now take that tagline and which other companies could use that exact same one? And if they could, like, we are the AI-powered marketing platform. We're like, okay, here's the 500 to 10,000 companies that could do that. And so I think like both the story you tell, I like how it's like the story you tell to get budget or to do whatever, but oftentimes you're not in that room, right? Like I guess the C-level you will be, but a lot of people maybe are one level removed from that and they have to be able to tell the story in the right way.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. And it's funny, I had this post on LinkedIn maybe 3 months ago that just blew up and I couldn't understand it. And it was a post about writing a manifesto and how like if I were to be like, go back to zero, I got nothing, I'm building marketing from nothing. What's the first thing I would do? And the first thing I would do is write a manifesto, which is really like, what's the reason that you exist in the world and what's going to be different 10 years from now, the fact that you exist versus if you didn't? What are you trying to change? Those types of things. And I feel like that's the fuel for all the other stories that you're going to tell. And that's the fuel for your entire brand. And you can't outsource it. You can't, obviously ChatGPT can help you and it can take, you can even have ChatGPT interview your founder to develop that manifesto, for example. But it's just something that, it has a soul and it's a story about something that you want to change or that you're battling or that you're, there's an enemy out there that you're trying to defeat to create this better world. Whatever it may be, I think that is like the guiding light of the brand that fuels everything else. And it's like, you have to start there before you can build anything.
I love that. We did one for our last company. I haven't done one now because the manifesto is constantly changing. And I feel like the last one, there's both good and bad in the fact that there's lots of options. Would you join a company where you couldn't write a manifesto, right? There's so many, like, I feel like Kandji, it's very clear what it does. You know it, and you probably wrote a great manifesto there. But as you think through your career, like, would you advise people to join a company where they don't have that type of thing? Or is that the first thing you do as CMO when you join?
Yeah, well, I would be happy to join a company that didn't have one, but I wouldn't join a company that's not willing to have one.
Oh, I like that.
Because I think it's so important for the founder to have a story and a strong opinion about why they started that business. And that story exists, whether you have a manifesto or not. Like, that story is in their head, in their heart somewhere. And so I think the marketer's role, especially if you're starting as the first marketer, is to draw that out of them and be able to, package that story up. Because in the beginning, the founder's doing all the sales and they're doing all the conversations, but then that doesn't scale. Obviously, you need to hire a sales team, and that sales team needs to be able to tell that story. They need to almost be able to put themselves in that founder's shoes and tell the story as if they were them. And so I think the manifesto is a great way to do that. And so, yeah, absolutely. If they don't have one, cool. Great opportunity to have that be the first thing that I would do.
Do you think there are companies out there that would struggle to write a manifesto, right? Because the market is undifferentiated or all of that, son?
Oh, 100%. And I think what you said earlier about, a tagline that could be any company's tagline is like so real. And, I see marketing all the time where you could just swap the logo for 50 other companies and you wouldn't know the difference. And I think that's a huge missed opportunity because especially now in like the age of AI, like that type of content and that type of positioning, that type of helpful content, that type of informative content is like commoditized. Like AI can do that.
Yeah.
And so people more than ever, we put value on the things that are scarce, and that story is something that's scarce, right? It's human. It's not something that AI can just come up with. They can help you bring it to life, but they can't have that soul of it. And so I think that's a way to stand out amongst the noise and be seen as valuable, because you have to do something that you can't outsource. And that, the like helpful, informative content, I think is just like, it almost is meaningless now because it's too easy to create.
Yeah, it's like and then companies are struggling with SEOs not working, GEO or whatever people call it is not quite there yet. It's still even more of a black box than SEO was as well, too.
100%. Everyone's putting out their conjectures around how to do it, but no one actually knows. Another thought that's coming to mind in terms of storytelling on my team right now, another thing that's really important to me is getting as close to the buyer as possible. So yes, you need to have the founder that has that manifesto-like story, but it's not just the founder, right? And I think some companies would struggle, right? If let's say they have an undifferentiated product, or maybe the founder just doesn't really think that way, or they struggle to articulate that way. I think you can also get that fuel from the customers themselves. And one of my big principles is proximity over playbooks, especially right now in AI where all the playbooks are going out the window. I think proximity to the customer, I have this belief that if you know the customer so well, the marketing strategy will almost write itself because you understand that buyer so well. You know their pain better than anyone. All the problems they deal with better than anyone. That is also some incredible fuel that you could almost write that manifesto just from that, right? That's, I think, something a lot of people are missing right now. All these people are trying to automate everything with AI and they're almost forgetting the customer, it feels like a lot of times.
I talked to a CEO of a AI startup yesterday, and we were talking in detail around they were just building features, but they weren't building features for an ICP or for a buyer. And the ability to niche down to get to that place and know who your true buyer is and understand them deeply and solve their problems at a deeper level is there's so many people, I wrote this thing, it's really cool. And I'm blowing up on ARR. I'm like, great, but do you really, that's a very low defensibility thing. But if you really understand people and how they tick, it's neat. Shifting over for a second, then, how do you build and structure your marketing team? Right? Based upon the philosophies you've got around storytelling, close to buyer, what does your team look like? How have you built it out? It's neat also to see that you've grown up through marketing to this point. So you've had a real chance to some people come in and then have to figure it out. You came in, I sensed that, and grew with the company and kept growing in seniority. So it'd be fun to figure out how you have built out that team and how you've evolved it over time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's two different models that come to mind. I have the model I'm using right now. My team's pretty small. We're only about 5 people, right? Very lean team, very lean and mean. But so I have a sort of framework for smaller teams and a framework for larger teams, both that have worked really well. So for smaller teams, what I have right now, the way that I think about the team is folks tend to gravitate into one of two groups, and I call them the tastemakers versus the operators. Mm-hmm. And I think this is specific to sort of this age of AI that we're in. But the tastemakers they probably have a film background or journalism background. They care about quality. They care about storytelling. And they're folks, though, that are able to do it with no ego. They want to do it from the perspective of knowing the customer better than anyone. And they generally aren't quite as interested, although not always the case, in the operator role, which the operator role is folks where you can give them 17 disconnected tools and they'll turn it into an engine. They probably have their house is probably rigged up as a smart home, and they probably automate everything. And that's just what they love to do. They love to roll up their sleeves and build with tools. And what I've noticed is that the folks on my team, they tend to sort of gravitate to one or the other. And when you pair those folks together, then you can really make some magic happen, because you can keep that sort of soul and storytelling alive, but then you can arm those folks with the automation in the right places to be able to extend that even further.
I love that. By the way, your point on the 5-person team is interesting. I think you probably know my sister, Melissa Booty, but we came up together with the idea of 2 pizza marketers, which is basically small teams are much easier than, I'm excited to hear your thesis on the big teams, but big teams are unwieldy, but here you can totally see how these people can work together versus you're throwing it over the wall to PMM or throwing it back over into design. So I think it's interesting to think through how you structure that. I like that. And I'm curious, it sounds like, at least my hunch is, that won't scale to a 30 or 40 person team.
Agreed. Yeah. So my model because I've managed much larger teams as well, something I did with larger teams was, I call it the squad model, which is that we have all these sort of jobs to be done. I think one of the toughest parts for a large marketing team is everything moves so slowly. Everything moves down to like a crawl because you've got this like assembly line where it's like, oh, it goes to copy, then it goes to design, and then it goes to approval, and then it goes to approval again, and then it goes to, maybe the growth team that's launching them, and then it goes to approval again. It's just this like, not only is it slow, but everything tends to get watered down a lot at each stage in that sort of like production assembly line, and it just takes forever. And so what I did with a larger team is I split them up into squads, and each squad was responsible for a certain area of marketing, and you could split it up however you wanted. For example, we had a squad that was responsible for account-based marketing. We had a squad that was responsible for SEO. We had one that was responsible for website conversion optimization. We had one responsible for follow-up, squads like that.
And so that would include like a design person. You might have a design team of 3, but one of those would be on the SEO and the web conversion squad, for example.
Exactly. So it was totally unrelated to the org chart of the team, but it allowed, each squad is self-sufficient. So they have, to your point, that designer on the team or the copywriter on the team on their squad. And there's certain roles like design and copy tend to be in a lot of different squads, right? Because they're supporting a lot of different folks. But the key to it, I think, was each squad leader was really responsible for their area. Like when we did quarterly planning, they would show up with a plan. And when they would run their weekly meeting with their squad to get everything done throughout the quarter, they would build in Asana their entire like working plan for the quarter, and they were responsible. And so I think that was really the game changer. They were responsible even for picking what goals they were pointed at. They were responsible for setting their own goals. And that was really powerful because it's almost like they have this permission and ownership to drive something, but then they don't just have permission and ownership to drive it. They have the resources on the team to get it done. And that was so powerful. When I switched to that squad model, just the productivity of the team exploded. It's funny, I was actually talking to someone on my team yesterday who was telling me, remember when we had this squad model, because she had been part of that. She was like, that I learned so much through that. She was like, I still show up today from things that I learned during that period because of the autonomy to basically like run my whole area and have like the resources to do it. So I think it's really powerful for getting stuff done, but also just for developing people, because you kind of get to see them in like a leadership position running their squad.
I love that. So no Asana then, right?
No Asana, did you say?
Yeah, the task management tool of marketers, right?
I know. Well, we did use Asana. Each squad had their own Asana board, but we recently switched to Notion actually, which we're kind of struggling with. Asana's pretty good. I don't know.
It was like built. It's funny. Like I think 90% of Asana's target base is marketers. Like you go into any company, it's like Jira for engineers, Asana for marketers for sure.
100%. I know. I hear really good things about ClickUp, which I would love to try at some point, but Asana definitely beat Notion, I think, in this case.
I think that is true. So as you think through like hiring a senior level role, how do you approach that? Like how do you post it? Do you not post it? How do you design the job description and kind of I'll leave it as free form for there?
Yeah, definitely. I think in most cases, post it for sure. I don't think it hurts to post it. There have been cases, obviously, where we've done confidential searches for whatever reason, but generally it's posted. And generally, I think the key with the senior hires is really finding someone who's kind of willing to like go deep with the team and someone that has the drive and ambition. The best success I've had with senior hires is actually when you're hiring someone to that next level. So maybe you're hiring a director level position and you recruit from sort of the senior manager level to hire into that director level position. And I think back to my first startup, like I really had something to prove, right? I had this chip on my shoulder and I was working way too many hours every day. And I was just so passionate because I was like, this is my shot to sort of make it at this next level. And so that's the most success I've had with senior hires is not necessarily hiring someone for a lateral move, but hiring somebody who's like, this is their step up. And then I think they just tend to come in with a bit more firepower to really prove themselves in that new role. And then, I think in terms of setting up the role, I think for those folks, it's most important for them to know, like, what lever are they trying to move? Like, what's their goal here? What are they what are we trying to accomplish? Like, why did we hire them? And those big why questions, I think, are much more important than, skills and details and all of that. And then, of course, from a leadership perspective, that's probably one of the most important things. Like, is this someone who's going to create the type of culture I want on my team? Because as a leader, you're so influential in that. And so I think for senior hires, more important than ever to really focus on that, what type of team culture do they want to build? How do they want to run their team? What kind of people do they want to hire? And who are they as a person? And I think that's one of the most important things, because it's not just the team they're running or the role that they're doing, but it's also they're a major driver of the team culture and the company culture.
I love that. Do you have any, I agree, like the culture, there's your culture and then their culture, and ideally they mix. Do you have any favorite ways to assess that in the interview process?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big thing is I always ask people their story. I ask them, it's usually the first question I ask, like, what's your story? And some people, tend to rattle through all the, like, I did this job and this job and this job. And I'm like, no. What's your story? Like, tell me about you. And so I really try to sort of dig into, and honestly, it's kind of an indicator. Like, are they willing to go there? And are they willing to share that story? Because that to me indicates an openness and a self-awareness about why they are the way that they are now. And so I love when people answer that question with a much richer answer than their, job history, but actually speak to the pivotal moments in their life or decisions that they made or even mistakes that they made. That to me indicates they have the level of self-awareness and vulnerability to be a good leader. Because I think if I've learned something more than anything, it's like, you cannot be walls up professional as a leader. Like, you have to lead with that level of vulnerability that allows your team to do the same and create this. That's how you create the safe space for them to express that. Like, you kind of have to go first. And so I want to hire someone who's willing to do that in like interview number one.
Do you remember a response to that question that like most impressed you? You don't have to name the person, but I'd be fascinated. It's because I think a lot of people are like, yeah, that makes sense. But it'd be fun to hear an example or two.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, I do remember, I don't even remember which role I was interviewing for, but I talked to somebody who, I asked them that opening question, and they went through, they were an immigrant who had moved to the US later in their life, and they talked about just how they learned to make it, and their career path was very all over the place, but they really clearly told this story of how they had, wanted to make it in the US and how they, even some of the hardship that they had gone through to make it where they are now. And, even though their resume seemed all over the place, it was just out of, them trying to find their foothold and find something that they love. And, they really clearly explained, if they left a certain job, they explained really clearly, maybe it was, they wanted something bigger. Maybe it was that it wasn't something that they were super passionate about, and then they had their sights on something bigger. So I always appreciate that part when they are willing to go into what, why they left certain jobs and why they made those career moves versus just like, oh, I got recruited by a company and I joined, like I want to hear a clear, conscious decision of why they made that move.
I like that. It's almost like the college essay, but in an interview stage, right? Like what really drives you? And it's hard to get it. I think we've all spent time trying to rewrite and write our college essays and having our parents do. I think you and I were talking before we started recording on the creative way people can break through to you. I think you were talking about the demo experience. I'd be fascinated to how you tell that story again.
Yeah. This was so special. So I interviewed somebody, and this was the one interview experience that's just blown me away outside of all of them. And I was interviewing somebody. It was for a product marketing role, and we were sponsoring a conference that the day after or something we had the first interview. They went to that conference. They went to our booth. They got a demo. They talked to our team, and so they understood how our team pitched the product. Then they went to all of our competitors' booths, and they got demos from all of them. And then they wrote me an email saying, here's the gap, like here's the opportunity of what you could be saying that's different from what your competitors are saying, but that you're not. And that was amazing because one, just the initiative to go and say, I want to, one, talk to people, meet the company, learn about the product, but then to come back with something valuable. I thought that was so incredible because they just showed a level of discernment and, here's a missed opportunity that I'd love to bring to you. And so they were bringing value before I even, had the second interview with them.
I love that. I'm betting you for the email around the entire company, right? Like, check this thing out. Look how smart this person is. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then I think when they joined, because of that, they almost had a leg up when they joined because everyone was like, oh, you're the person that wrote that email. So they almost had buy-in already before they started.
Yeah, they had respect from the sales team, right? They probably had respect from other functions as well, too, of this person is customer focused. They're listening. They're not just sitting in a room designing messaging, but like they get it, which is super powerful.
Yeah.
Well, congrats to that person. At some point, we'll hopefully meet him. You had this awesome post a while back on the 500. You'd interviewed 500 people. I'm guessing it's higher now. But all the interview mistakes, I'd love you to talk about some of the worst ones you see. We can have a lot of fun with this one for a while.
Yeah, this post was hilarious. I ran the numbers. I've done over 500 interviews since I've been at Kandji. And I just kept seeing these same mistakes over and over again. And some of them to me felt so simple that I was like, people need to know that these are going to like raise a major red flag. So one of them, for example, was the number of people that I get on an interview with that ask me what my role is or how long I've been at Kandji. And I'm like, I'm the CMO. I was the fourth employee. I've been here for 6 years. You could find that in 10 seconds on LinkedIn. And it just makes me feel like they don't want the job because they haven't even cared to like look at LinkedIn and find all those easy answers. And then you're also just wasting this valuable time in an interview where you could be telling your story. And instead, I'm telling you my very obvious one.
We got this one post, one of our playbooks talks about interview tactics. Where don't ask non-serious questions, right? Yeah. Like those would be, hey, what do you think about the culture of the company? Or what do you, it's like those questions are throwaway questions and you're missing the opportunity both to learn more yourself and vice versa. I couldn't agree more. Like you see one of those, you're like, ugh, now I got to answer that question, right? Like, and you phone it in yourself with the answer back, and then you're kind of downgrading them in your own mind.
Yeah. Or like a question I get a lot is, what's the culture of the company? And that's not a bad question at all. And I think it's coming from a really good place, but it's such a generic question. Like anyone could ask that to anyone. So it makes me feel like they didn't think about what they actually wanted to learn from me. Like you could ask the recruiter that question, or you could ask me a question that's more specific to my team, like, being more specific in general. And I think I put this in the post, but another thing I see a lot is people, I see this especially with folks that are earlier in their careers, but I see it across the board. People love to like speak in these broad, sweeping terms, and they love to use these like big marketing-y words. And that indicates to me that you're sort of posturing more than you're actually, saying what you've actually done. And then they end up saying a lot of words without really saying anything. And like, I would rather hear about the tool you used and the workflow you built or the vendor that you used or collaborated with or who across the org you worked with or how you pitched an idea. Like, I want to hear specifics, because if I don't hear specifics, then I don't believe you. Yeah. I don't believe you actually did it. And that could be totally false, but like, it's like, prove it to me. Prove to me that you've done it. And if folks are speaking in these like really broad sweeping terms, I just feel like there's nothing real there for me to latch onto. And I end up leaving the call feeling like, I don't know if they actually did that thing, even if they did.
I had a podcaster we just recorded yesterday had this thing of the stories that you tell. Two things. One is, are you telling the same story differently to different interviewers? That's a huge red flag.
Yes.
The second one is, are you telling the same story over and over and over again? Then it means you probably don't have that many stories. And I thought that was really interesting. No.
That is super interesting. Yeah, that's a really good point, because you might have like one specific story. It's kind of like you can sit down at the piano and play one song. Like you can't really play piano.
I love kids right now, but that's they're getting better. The Die Hard theme song plays a lot in our house right now. That's actually a value of the recorded interviewing, and right, like the meta views, if you've seen those of the world or some of those places where they're you can then take it and compare the answers and figure out the consistency. I think that's always interesting of, oh, so-and-so told me this. They didn't tell me that. They told me this other thing. And if you can cross-reference those can become really powerful.
Yeah.
What other mistakes have you seen there?
A big one for sure is just like not willing to share absolutely anything personal. We've talked about that a lot already, but, someone who's just sort of ultra professional where it's like, I can't feel you. Like I need to feel you as a person. And if I can't feel you at all, if I can't feel your passion, and if I can't feel your enthusiasm, then that to me is a huge red flag. I think one that's related to that is a question I very often ask is like, what are your dreams? What do you want for the future? What do you want to build? And I very, very often talk to people that don't have an answer to that question. And that always surprises me because either they maybe don't know how to quite articulate it, or, they're just desperate for a job and they just want the job and they're like, whoa, I'm getting hit with this question about my dreams. But yeah, I want people that have dreams. I want to hire somebody who, when they leave working for me, they're in a better spot and they're a better person and they're more set up for success than they were when they joined. I want people who are going to be, dynamic and reach for that next thing, whether it's at this company or at a different one. And that's something I'm really passionate about. And so someone doesn't have dreams, I feel like there's no fuel there for me to work with.
Yeah. I think some people are living life as it hits them. Other people have a plan. I think we always can, if you sit down and be like, hey, Sylvia, tell me your plan, you can always tell it looking back. It's really easy, even if it was a total shit show and you were off-road and everything like that. But I feel like a decent chunk of people, we always ask people when they apply to Whisper, like, do you have, we call it like a focus statement. Like, can you articulate the role you would want? And if you can't, Whisper's probably not right for you, because we're here to help you go do your search for you versus you sit back and wait. I think at some point, everyone gets hit. I would say everyone gets punched in the face at some point in their career. When you're not getting pulled out, you're not getting recruited, you've got to go search. And I think that's when people really, really struggle if they don't have that dream or thesis or focus. And they're just like, I was the smartest person in the room. People always wanted to hire me, right? Like that feels great until it doesn't.
Yeah. Another one that I see a lot is people who they don't have a clear reason for why they're leaving their current company or why they've left, past roles. I always see that as a major red flag because that's something you should be able to articulate and have a reason for. Another thing that I see early on, before I even get on the interview, is folks where their resume and their LinkedIn are different. Whether the dates don't match or whether there's just like some detail in some but not the other. I personally always look at LinkedIn. I don't even look at resumes because they're all different formats and I can't, like I'm looking at like 100. I can't look at 100 different formats. LinkedIn's much more consistent, easy for me to look at. And so if the LinkedIn and the resume doesn't match, and I have other colleagues that are like, I only look at the resume, I never look at the LinkedIn. So everyone's different. So I think the safest route is to just have them match exactly. That's what I would recommend, just in my experience, because you just never know whether people are going to look at one or the other. And it always like is so confusing to me when, there's some role that's like, maybe it's an advisor role or something and it's on the resume and not the LinkedIn. That just always, feels to me like an inconsistency that's like, okay, why is it the case? Are you trying to hide something? Or were you, a little sloppy in putting this together? Regardless of what the red flag is, I think there could be multiple there. But that's always something that I find concerning if they don't match. And it's easiest for my mind if they just like match exactly.
I like that. I think a lot of, to our earlier point on people may not have a story or a vision for their career, there are these websites that will take your resume and your LinkedIn and they will personalize it for every job. And so I think what you're going to end up seeing is people are applying for, different types of things. And so they get caught in that because you can only have one, you can have multiple resumes, but you can only have one LinkedIn, which is why I tend to go to the LinkedIn myself too. Like I think everyone's like, can you give me resume advice? I'm like, I saw 3,000 LinkedIns last month. I saw 5 resumes. When I applied for my last job with Carta, I think I pulled together a resume in after the offer was there. And so I'm with you on that. But because I think LinkedIn is, if you're generic and vanilla, and you're not interesting and there's no storyline on the LinkedIn that's there, but you get forced to be generic and vanilla if you've got multiple different things you're trying to play. So
Absolutely. And I see this too sometimes where people will apply to multiple roles. And if it's just like two different roles that are kind of similar, okay, fine. But sometimes I'll see folks apply to roles that are like drastically different. And then I'm like, okay, you don't know what you want.
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah, like they will literally apply to the...
You can see the other roles they've applied to. And so it's just like, wait, what?
Yeah, you're literally seeing their resume twice, one for like head of demand gen and one for head of product marketing. And you're like,
yeah,
only one should fit.
Yeah.
Tell me about no clear reason why leaving. I agree with that, but at the same time, there oftentimes are, you don't, as a candidate, I don't think you want to be too cynical, too broken, too jaded. And sometimes you just have a shitty boss, or you didn't click with that boss, or the company's not doing well. And so what is the right answer for that question, right? Like, how candid do you want somebody to be? Because I think sometimes people consciously are not trying to be fully candid on that one.
Yeah, no, I do think that's a really delicate balance. I actually have one of our other executives I was asking him like about his advice. He's really great at hiring. And I was talking to him a couple of years ago, asking like, what do you really look for or see? And he was like, the number one thing that I will never hire someone if they talk badly about a former job. And that was his number one thing.
Don't be jaded, because then you're never going to work at our company. I agree.
Yeah, exactly. And so I do think it's a delicate balance. Although, of course, there might be times where your reason for leaving is because your boss was terrible for X reasons, right? So that could be true. So then how do you balance those two things? You don't want to badmouth the former employer, but then you also have a real reason why you left. So my thought on that is that, I think you can express it through specifics. And so if there's something that was really challenging, maybe it was that catalyst that made you leave, I think you can express the facts of what happened in very specific detail. Like you could say, oh, I left this company because it wasn't a fit for the working style or the culture that I wanted to create. And here's a really specific example. And not in a way that's bad-mouthing or pointing fingers, but just like, this very specific thing happened. Here's the raw facts of this, one thing as an example of the misalignment. Not making them wrong, but just saying like this is why it wasn't a fit for me, instead of just like, oh yeah, they were terrible. Like, okay, that doesn't really give me much. But if you can give me something very specific and that's just facts that shows a misalignment, I think that's the way to frame it. Misalignment, and then, something specific that helps me understand that. So I'm not sitting there wondering, if you just had a bad relationship with the boss,
I think that's right. That's my theory, like to say without saying, right? It's like, and then if you, Sylvia, wants to click in and ask, then you've given me permission to get a little bit negative, but I haven't gone there as my default setting. So that
right. And another thing you could do is really just describe what you wanted. So let's say you move from one company to another. Let's say you're leaving a current company, and I ask why you're leaving. You could say, oh, I'm really looking for these 10 things or these 2 things or these 5 things. And by saying what you want, you're indicating that you weren't getting those things at your previous company, but you're doing it without pointing the finger at them.
I love that. Yeah. And then you can imply or click in if you need to.
Yeah.
This is amazing. I realized we just ran out of time, but we could probably spend another hour talking about mistakes people make on things. When we publish the episode, I'll make sure to link to your post on that, because I thought it was so good. That was one of the reasons why I was so excited to connect with you in the first place. Well, thank you so much for this. I learned a ton. I'm excited for our next conversation as well.
Me too. I know I could talk about this all day. So thanks for having me. This is great.